what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello and welcome to Footcandle Films. I am Alan and with me is Chris, here to talk about some films, both in theaters and online, that you may enjoy. How you doing, Chris?
Doing good.
Good to see you again, as always. And we do have some pretty interesting and good diverse group of films we're going to be discussing today. We have two main reviews. We'll be discussing the documentary Bully in a little while after our main review, and also have some movie news and recommendations from each of us at the end of the show about some movies you might be able to find online. But first, we're going to move right into our main review, which is the current hit film, The Amazing Spider-Man.
How did you get out there?
Fire escape.
It's 20 stories.
Your doorman's intimidating.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Parker.
Not much to tell, really.
Peter lives with his aunt and uncle.
Did you catch that spider guy yet?
No, but we will. This guy wears a mask like an outlaw.
I think he's trying to do something maybe the police can't.
Can't?
If you're gonna steal cars, don't dress like a car thief.
You a cop?
You seriously think I'm a cop in a skin-tight red and blue suit?
Alan, it's the summer of 2012.
Yes, it is.
We have 3 superhero movies. We've had the Avengers. Batman's on the horizon coming down.
Yes.
But right now, everybody's focusing on The Amazing Spider-Man.
Sure.
It's been 5 years since Raimi's 3 movies about Spider-Man.
Is that all? Wow, it's flown by.
Time flies.
It has flown by.
First 2, pretty well received. Third one, a little bit mixed
Not so
on.
much. Yeah.
So with this one, it's a new director, Mark Webb, and a new guy playing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield from Facebook fame. He was not the lead character, but he was the friend in that movie.
Yes, he was.
So question I have for you is, it's been 5 years. So did the spider hatch from the egg a little too soon, or was timing perfect for this reboot? And I guess a simpler way to put that would be, this movie was about Spider-Man, but was it amazing?
There's a lot of questions you just threw in there. Let me see how best I can tackle that. A little background first, I'll give you on this. I am a huge Spider-Man fan.
Okay.
As I was as a kid, that was the comics I read every single month. All the cartoons, I can sing all the theme songs from all the different cartoon shows. I mean, I was pretty heavy duty into it as a kid.
Okay.
I now have a young 5-year-old son who is obsessed with Spider-Man, to the point where he wears a Spider-Man costume around the house almost every day now. He saved up for 6 months for a web shooter that he got at the store the other
So
day.
he didn't make it himself?
No. He's not quite Peter Parker level yet.
Okay.
So Spider-Man is all around my family and with my kids now. And so this movie was very, very heavily anticipated. Now, to your question about did it hatch too soon, seeing as that 2007 or 5 years ago or so was the last Spider-Man movie, maybe a bit too soon. Maybe. I think I would have appreciated this film more in another year or two than 2012.
Right.
But that being said, it is what it is. I think there had to do with some sort of, there may have been some legal ramifications that ownership of the Spider-Man property would have lapsed if they didn't do something with the film. They did want to go the direction Sam Raimi was planning on going, maybe because of the third movie, maybe because he wasn't interested. I'm not sure what happened there. And plus, I do think Tobey Maguire, the Mary Jane, who was that?
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, Kirsten Dunst. Probably they played out their roles. I think they were getting too old, I think, and maybe they just they'd run their pace. So, back to the question, was it too soon? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but I think they kind of had to do what they had to do. But was the film amazing? I think it was. I freaking love this film.
Wow.
I had such a great time with it. As a big Spider-Man fan, was it perfect? No. There were a lot of things about it that I did not like. But as a whole, it entertained me enough to the point where I was able to overlook the few things that I did have some issues with, which I'll be happy to mention a little bit later on. But overall, the film I thought was exciting. I thought the actors, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, Both of them playing much, much younger characters than they really are in real life.
Yeah, I had a problem with that.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. They were playing high school students, even though I think they're easily both in late 20s, early 30s, maybe even. But you know what? Those two actors just mopped the floor, I thought, with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst.
Agreed.
I actually thought in the old Spider-Man movies that Tobey Maguire was a horrible Peter Parker. I thought he was a very boring Spider-Man. And Kirsten Dunst, she was fine, but nothing spectacular about her in that role. Honestly, the Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker we got in this film, I thought were perfect. Perfect. Acted, perfect characterization, everything. I thought the action was really good. I thought it was exciting. The villain, a little lackluster. Not the best villain I think they could have thrown in the mix, personally, with the lizard. What's the guy's name who played him?
Oh, it's kind of hard to say.
I know.
Like Rife Ethans or something
right,
like that.
exactly.
However we want to say his name.
You'll recognize him if you know him, you've seen him in other movies.
Yeah.
Great actor. But I do think the villain was not terribly interesting to me as a villain. But we can get into some of the things that didn't work as well. But I will say overall, I was very happy. My kids were very happy. I wish this was the Spider-Man movie they would have come out with in 2002 instead of the one we got from Sam Raimi. I think I would have looked at it with a much, much stronger perspective than even the one I have now. So like I said, if it had been a few more years from now, I think it would have been even more appreciated by me. As it is now, I really enjoyed it with a few misgivings, but overall, really enjoyed it. How about you, Chris?
Well, I enjoyed it. It's not a bad film, but I guess there was so much residue from those other three films that I just couldn't get certain aspects of it in my mind. It was so similar. I mean, it's an origin story.
It is a very similar movie.
And so they are kind of rebooting it. So they tell the origin story, but there just weren't many interesting parts to me. Not to say I was bored, because it was well acted.
Right.
I just didn't find it that interesting. If you hadn't seen the other three Spider-Man movies, then this you'd probably think this was. I think you'd be well served by seeing this one and just forgetting the other three, because it is far superior. It's just, to me, I will say, I want to save it. One thing I thought was really, really good. I'll save that part for when you get into things we really liked. But it just had to do with, I didn't feel there was a lot of new material. And I don't want to spoil some things, although if you've seen the other Spider-Man movies, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I'm trying to keep this vague. He's interested in Gwen Stacy. You mentioned that.
Sure.
Okay, in the original three Spider-Man movies, there's kind of a I can't do this breakup moment that kind of centers around a cemetery. Okay, that happens again.
We have one here too.
And
yeah.
I really, really, really didn't like that. That really bothered me. And it's this whole thing like, I need to be Spider-Man. And it was like, really? This is like copy and paste out of the movie. Better acted here.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like, oh man.
I'll admit the ending with the scene happening in conjunction with a funeral.
Trying to keep it vague.
Yeah. And the choice that Peter Parker makes with regards to the girl that he's seeing. Yes. Very similar. That did smack of some repeating from the first movie. But I'll tell you, I think in a way, I kind of actually liked the fact that I was watching the origin story again, because I was watching it to see how are they going to make it a little different.
How are they going to?
It wasn't dramatically different, but it did have enough differences that it kept my attention. I wanted to know, so they didn't go this route. They're going to go this route this time. That was, to me, interesting. I do think the ending, like you just brought out, the funeral part, yes, was probably the most... I kind of thought to myself walking out, wow, they just ended on exactly the same note the first movie did. Yes, that was a little disappointing. Although I think I liked the way this one ended better than I did the first Spider-Man movie. This one had more of an emotional resonance to me than the first Spider-Man movie did.
Right.
But it was very similar in the way it was plotted out. I agree with that.
And I thought that, to say a good thing, that, the original ones, the way they did kind of his origin story as far as like costume development,
right,
and exploring how he's able to shoot webs, I thought was much more interestingly done in this one.
Okay.
So I
agree.
appreciated that, and I appreciate that.
Well, I think overall, it sounds like we're kind of saying the same thing. I was definitely more enthusiastic about it maybe than you were, but we both agree that if the previous Spider-Man films had not existed, or if this one came out several years later than it did,
right,
the appreciation factor would have been much higher for it.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that. Some things I thought really worked in the film, and I'd love to hear kind of your positives as well before we get to some of the criticisms of it maybe. I mentioned the acting already. I think overall acting was better. Even Sally Fields as Aunt May and Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben. I liked both of them better.
Like Sally Field, Martin Sheen annoyed me.
Really?
Yeah, and I'd have to. There were just certain scenes that it was just like, I don't know, because he was such a big name, he was kind of playing this more like humble guy than what I expect from him. It wasn't that it was bad acted, just somehow, I guess maybe miscast. Sally Field, I thought was like,
she was great.
Dead on.
She was good.
Yeah, and I was really
overall,
happy
I
to see
think
her.
just acting across the board. I can't think of a single role or character that was in the original films that I thought was not better acted here this time around. I think everything got elevated acting wise. I thought the action was fine. I mean, I don't think it was better or worse than the action we had in the first movie. I liked the villain, even though I do think the Lizard was not the most impressive villain in the world. I hated the Green Goblin in the first movie, the way they made it work with the Power Rangers type of robot mask, and it just didn't work for me at all. So I did like at least where they went with this villain this time better than the first Spider-Man movie.
Another thing that kind of, there again, I think one of the things that bothered me about this movie, why I'm not as maybe as excited as you are, is the similarities that kind of wove themselves, to use a web metaphor, into this movie bothered me. And that kept me from just thinking it was awesome.
Right.
A similarity, you mentioned the Green Goblin. If I'm not mistaken, because it's been a few years since I've seen those original movies, Green Goblin kind of has this like psychological problem. Like he's kind of like split, and it's like good goblin, bad goblin. He kind of has this dialogue in his head. He's kind of confused, or there's something going on.
He's
there.
Psychotic. I mean, it is it's a dual personality thing.
Here's
Yeah.
Okay. In this movie with the Lizard, that was kind of going on again, and I was like, really, so it's just little things like that that kind of bother me. And actually, I kind of was like, okay, but then. Please stay during the credits, because there's, of course, the obligatory scene that they show.
At least they put it halfway through the credits, not the very end of the credits.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, when that scene happened, I will not. Go into detail, but it's kind of a scene that it does use the Lizard. Okay, I'll say. And I kind of was like, "Do what?" Like I kind of didn't understand.
I can talk about that though.
Oh,
well,
okay.
Maybe after the recording's done, maybe we'll keep talking for a few minutes. If you're at the end of the show and you listen through the end our end song. Keep listening and see if we
if you
catch
want
on a few minutes at the end.
Listen after the theme music, and Al and I will discuss it.
We'll talk a little bit more about this.
Kind of like, is that just a revisit? But that kind of bothered me, the whole split personality.
I'll admit, the number one fault of this whole movie is that it did have too many similarities and too many comparisons back to the original. If it wasn't for that, I think there again, your enjoyment of it would be even greater than what I had, which was pretty darn enjoyable anyway. Sure. Now, what are some things... A couple more things I thought were really impressive about the film, and then we'll go into some more criticism, because I do have some. I do have some things that didn't work for me. I already mentioned the acting, but overall, the story, the relationship between Peter and Gwen, I totally bought. I thought was well handled. I thought it was real. Where I always felt the Peter Mary Jane relationship in the old movies felt a little forced. I just never understood those two people Mary Jane being attracted to Peter in the old films. Okay. Here, I totally got it. I totally saw these two people coming together, the attraction, the kind of the intrigue between it. It worked for me. And I think these two actors really pulled that relationship off. I actually think those scenes were probably the most enjoyable scenes for me, when it's those two having a dialogue or dealing with a situation. To me, were really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with that. I think it was a more convincing relationship overall. Sure.
I think the fact that the costume and all the action was more realistic is definitely in the first half of the movie. Now, it got a little CGI heavy towards the end, but I think overall when he's learning and going out and stopping the car thief and a lot of those shots were without CGI at all. I noticed, and it helped. I think it just felt more real. The costume felt real. Everything just felt more authentic.
Did you see the movie in 3D?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good, because I did not.
Okay.
Was the 3D part in that CGI part at the end, or was it pretty spread throughout? Like the CG or the 3D part that's really heavy that they basically like
3D really was not. Actually, I would recommend anybody, you don't need to see this thing in 3D, because the 3D was not heavily used at all.
Well, actually, and that kind of irritates me, because I feel like sometimes me not watching it in 3D, there were certain scenes towards the end where it was like, you would see a shot and you're like, okay, that's just in there. So that
there are one or two shots that were for 3D, but overall the 3D experience was kind of a letdown because it really didn't add anything to the film.
Interesting.
It really didn't. I actually was very disappointed with the 3D. Supposedly it was shot in 3D, but I couldn't have told. It looked like one of the upconverted films to me.
Really?
In that, yeah.
Okay.
So
interesting.
I don't recommend anybody paying for 3D. There's no reason, no benefit to it. So, but yeah, I thought overall a fun film. I'm very optimistic about where they're going with this series now. Mark Webb, he did 500 Days of Summer, which is a film I really liked. Completely different film.
Yes.
But the one thing that he does seem to have a real handle on is relationships and writing characters that are going through a relationship or building a relationship. I think he's got that down pat. Both films really played off that strength. So I'm excited. I hope they land him for the second film. I don't know what the plans are. I know the actors are all committed for 3 films, so that's a good thing. So we'll see where it goes from there.
I think, too, one of the problems, you said you're a Spider-Man guy.
Yeah.
And I tend to be, as anyone who's probably listened to the podcast, I'm more of a Batman guy.
Yes, yes.
And
you are the Dark Knight.
I am the Dark Knight.
Yes.
He's more grounded in realism and I know Spider-Man, which plays true to the comic books, he's more of a joking person.
Yes.
All that I did not have a problem with. And I thought he did a much better job, Andrew Garfield.
Much better.
More like jokey. And when he was Spider-Man, he would joke with the villains or joke with his enemies or joke with the car thieves and stuff like that. So I thought all that worked and I enjoyed it and I thought it was really good. The one thing that, there again, I guess it was kind of a plot device that I wasn't really sure why they did it other than to kind of tug at the heartstrings, which... that irritates me, was the use of the cranes.
Yeah.
That kind of irritated me. I'm not going to say what, but basically, Spider-Man, kind of towards the end, he's ending up having to rely on some outside help. And how that
he's having to rely on some people in the city to help him get somewhere.
Yes.
And
he's obviously a union member. Let's just say that because
of an injury he endures. Yes, no. If you think through that scene really carefully, it's hokey. It really doesn't make sense.
No.
However, it got me. It worked for me. I think every good movie with a character like this, Spider-Man is a character so rooted in New York City. That is his thing. He is basically a byproduct of that city. To see people in the city rally behind him, that's very classic comic book Spider-Man.
And I agree. And I think if they had just handled it, he wins the trust of this individual, and the individual ends up lining up.
C. Thomas Howell, by the way.
Oh, okay. Ends up lining up the awesome. He ends up lining the cranes to help Spider. Right. Okay, if it had just been like he had done it, then it would have been. But the fact that they pushed it as far as they did, because I believe that this guy trusts Spider-Man now.
Sure.
I totally get, and I actually liked the rescue scene that ends up in winning his trust. Yes. I like that whole scene. I thought that was
very well done.
That was one of my good parts that I thought was surprising how it was handled, and it was handled really well.
Sure.
Like you're saying, relationships.
Yes.
But then the quote unquote payoff of that later,
it was a little hokey.
It was a little much.
I'll admit, it was hokey. Got a couple groans in the audience when that happened. However, I bought it. I was
you didn't
okay
see it
with
at the same time as me.
Yeah,
One of those groans
Wait
could
a
have
minute,
been
that
me.
was you groaning back there.
Right.
Yeah, that was that was a little much, but it worked for me. I liked the scene personally. Some criticisms I had. There were a few things that didn't work as well for me. Yes, the two characters are really old for their part.
Yes.
Okay, they're playing 17-year-old high school students, but they're pushing 30. And even though I thought Andrew Garfield probably pulled it off better than Gwen Stacy did look older. I mean, sorry, she didn't pull off a 17-year-old girl.
Yeah.
That was a little distracting at times. However, the way I kind of rationalize it in my brain is that, well, the trade-off is I'm getting two really, really good actors playing these parts.
Okay, question. See, this is the thing that bothers me with the whole, let's just, I know people hate the phrase reboot, but we'll call it a reboot. Why couldn't they have just been college students? Why did they have to do high school? Because then everything, it wouldn't have bothered me. It's like, okay, but when they're in high school, I just don't buy, just do college. Why did they have to root
I'll tell you why. Because, and it's going to relate to even our next review, talking about teenagers and pressures and all that. Spider-Man is a symbol for teen
nerds.
angst and pressure and everything else going around.
Okay.
You put them in college, kids are normally a little more confident in their life by that point.
Okay.
It's not got quite the background around it is. You don't have the bully, the Flash Thompson picking on them and all that.
Oh, let's talk about Flash Thompson.
Okay, well, what's with Flash Thompson is the school bully. He is, in the comic books, he's been there from day one, always tormenting Peter Parker. But he eventually, in the comics and in the movie as well, turns out to be a huge Spider-Man fan. What's your issue there?
I didn't buy it.
Really? You didn't buy him as a character, or just what?
Yeah, and I didn't buy his sudden turnaround.
Oh,
I didn't buy his turnaround.
That was really well handled. Yeah. Yeah,
it didn't.
He's
didn't
a
work for
bully,
me.
but yet he's not.
Oh, and I got the bully part. That was fine.
But yet he's not a complete 100% jerk.
Well, and I never saw that until, it's no surprise. People know this if you've seen the first movie. Peter Parker's uncle dies.
Yeah.
Okay, and
That shouldn't be a shocker. I mean, that pretty much happens in every Spider-Man origin movie. But
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, which informs who he is and makes him Spider-Man and everything. So, anyways, that's he's bully. Spider-Man has a scene where he shows him up, not as Spider-Man, but as Peter Parker. He shows him up. The very next time you see him, Uncle died, and he has become this nice guy who's sympathetic. Now, granted, in high school, if someone's, person died that was in their family, I imagine you're not going to go up and then bully that person. You're probably going to give them a day off. But would you approach them and then say, I just didn't buy
the way they played Flash, I thought was pretty interesting. They played Flash as this very passive-aggressive guy where it's like, in the very first scene we see him, he is tormenting another kid.
Correct.
And he's like, hey, Peter Parker, take a picture of this. Okay, so right away, he already has some level of respect for Peter to some degree. Peter's not the initial guy he's picking on.
True.
But when Peter says, no, I'm not going to do that, Flash, you got to put him down. Stop. There is a little bit already of this respect level there, a little bit. More than we ever had in the first movie where Flash is just a bully and just picks on everybody. I think they're already setting the stage to say, you know what, Flash is actually, he's a human being. He's okay. He's got some real anger issues, and he has to let out those anger issues when somebody doesn't agree with him or do what he wants. But he never consciously goes after Parker as a target. He is just acting out because he's just got some anger issues. And in a way, that I was okay with that because he never once came up and was just completely mean to Peter. Everything was more reactionary to people not listening to him or not giving him what he wants. So that's my take on it. That's my little psychology lesson for the day here.
Well,
anyway.
you may have.
I think it worked okay for me.
It bothered me initially, but maybe you won me over.
Did you have any other criticisms of the film?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear them then.
I'd forgotten until you.
Yeah.
Why wasn't he shooting a digital camera?
Oh, as a photographer?
Yeah.
Couldn't afford it. Yeah. The question is why Peter Parker was still shooting an analog camera as a photographer. I think
to get the film developed, I don't know that I buy that.
I think that's more of an image thing.
If it had happened, if they had set the movie in a different time period, I would buy that. But in this current day and age,
what if that was a camera his father had given him? Maybe they should have mentioned that if that was the case, but
because
would that
to me
have helped?
it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you shooting? Why are you shooting film? I mean, granted, okay, maybe you're more of a snobby photographer, and you're like, it's the art of doing it or something, which maybe I could have bought, but they didn't explain that, and I'm just like, that makes no sense. Yeah. And at first, I actually thought it was set in a different time period, and then he starts going on his computer. I'm like, wait a second, you're this big savvy dude, and he misses out, which I liked. They did a reference to. I guess in the next movie they're going to develop him as a reporter or a photographer for the paper because they did a reference where he set the camera up and was getting shots of, and it ends up not working. And I was like, okay, is that the payoff? Is that why this doesn't work? Because the film's ripped out and it's not on a car. Is that the only reason they did it so that he wouldn't get these pictures? But
I think there were a lot of things that they were setting up for future films, and I think they were trying to balance that line of we want to be more modern and hip and relevant to today's society. However, there's certain elements, certain images we want to make sure still get carried over. The image of the old analog camera with Peter Parker is very symbolic.
I understand.
So they I think they felt the need to tie that in a little bit. The fact that they went to mechanical web shooters again instead of it coming out of his arm, which I think is really cool because that always grossed me out with the first Spider-Man film. To think that web's shooting out of your body, that's just
I guess
wrong.
The choices they made I would have just chosen like the mechanical web shooter. That made sense to me. I bought that, and I liked that choice. The choice of them having shoot an analog camera didn't make sense to me. So just different choices.
Do you have anything else to nitpick on this film about?
I don't think so. I do have something I really, really liked.
Okay,
but,
tell me, please. Let's end on a positive.
Yeah. But other than no, I think all my nitpicks are done. Do you have any other things that you?
No. Okay. I think there are a couple scenes that didn't work as well. The scene in the subway when he starts realizing his powers, I thought was a little sloppy and a little rushed. I would have liked a little more time of him starting to realize things were going on.
Yeah.
A couple other minor scenes didn't work as well. I don't like CGI bad guys, and unfortunately, the lizard is a CGI creation. It was a little frustrating.
But I thought it was
as far as a CGI character goes, is about as good as you can get. So other than that, a few little misgivings, but overall, no, it's just an overall and very enjoyable film for me.
I'll say I was going to saving my favorite moment of the film, and I really, really, really liked it. And it was one of those things where it rose above the past Spider-Man movies for me because it used an element of Spider-Man in, I thought, a really creative way, and I don't remember him ever doing it before. There's a scene where he's in the sewer tunnels, and he lays out a web kind of detection device to keep things vague. Just basically he puts out a web, and it's his way of detecting where things might be.
If somebody's crawling in one of the tunnels or something. Yeah.
I thought that was awesome.
Well, it was a cool visual of him actually sitting on top of the crux of all those web lines, like just hanging out, waiting.
And just like a normal spider.
Yes.
I thought that scene was really, really well done and just a really cool idea. I thought that was awesome.
I had my favorite scene too, and it's a very slight item, but the fight between Spider-Man and the Lizard in the school, which I thought was probably my most enjoyable fight.
Are you talking about the cameo?
No. I'm talking. I thought overall the whole school fight scene was really well done because Spider-Man was probably his most humorous with his lines. It was like a truly good fight, good battle. It was
surprising that happened too. Yeah. That really surprised me that they took the fight to the school.
Oh yeah. So overall, that whole thing was pretty well done, I thought. But there's a scene where the Lizard knows Peter Parker, Spider-Man. They fight a little bit, and he throws Peter Parker through a wall or something. And Peter's gone for a few moments, and the Lizard's there kind of taunting him to come out. And when he jumps out, he's got the costume on, and the music swells a little bit. To me, it was a really nicely done, perfect superhero moment.
Spider-Man moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there was no reason he needed to put his costume on other than that made him who he was.
Sure.
So I thought that worked out really well. A lot of good scenes. I could keep going on and on with this. It sounds like overall, we both enjoyed the film. I really enjoyed it. The difference for us, or the challenge for us, was just realizing we had to separate this film from the older one, which was only 10 years ago. The first one came out. It's a little tough. A lot of repeating, a lot of similar things that did hurt the film a little bit. But overall, I still think very enjoyable. Chris, would you recommend to people they still check it out?
Yes. It's okay. And I think for those listeners that have heard our review of The Avengers, I liked it better than The Avengers.
Really?
So
Great.
It stepped up. What I'm looking forward to is Avengers was good. Spider-Man was better.
Oh, I know what you're waiting for.
Batman, I think, will be the best.
Yeah, I got a feeling
But, it could really let me down because my expectations are pretty high.
Expectations are pretty sky high. I got to admit, expectations were very low going into the Spider-Man movie, so it's very easy to impress people at this point. Dark Knight Rises will be the key for the superhero clan out there to see how it does. So, great. Well, that is our review of The Amazing Spider-Man. Well, we talked a long time on that one.
We did.
Next up, though, is trying to keep with our format of one more mainstream film every time we get together, and then one that we consider our little Footcandle film. It's our smaller film that we've seen here locally. Just had a screening last night of the documentary Bully. So let's hear a clip from the trailer.
I feel kind of nervous going to school because I like learning, but I have trouble with making friends.
They said he's a geek. Some kids had told him that he's worthless to go hang himself. And I think he got to the point to where enough was enough.
Tonight, a tragic situation.
A Perkins boy, just 11 years old, believed to have been...
We are both parents of young children. Yes. And I would imagine that you and I are both conscious of the idea of bullying. I mean, we went to school at a different time where, yes, there were bullies. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was to the level that we know exist in the school systems today. There's a lot more things for kids to be picked on about. There's a lot more differences in children at times. There's a lot more anxiety about things. I think bullying has definitely been elevated as an issue, even more so than you and I when we were kids in high school or middle school. So a documentary has come out recently, one that got a lot of attention and controversy for its rating. Initially rated R, because I think of some choice language used in the film. The Weinsteins who put this documentary out really fought hard to get it down to a PG-13 rating because they wanted to make sure kids could see it. You know, it's one thing to talk to the parents about bullying, and yes, parents have a certain role, but you know, the kids need to hear these messages too. So I think that was the whole reason for trying to get the rating down to PG-13. But this film, Bully, documentary, came out this year from director Lee Hirsch. I did not get a chance to see it, unfortunately, last night due to some unforeseen circumstances, but you did.
Yes.
So I'm really curious. I'm desperately wanting to seek this film out. I had really looked forward to seeing it last night. Can you tell me, as both a documentary from a film standpoint and from a content standpoint, did it work on either or both of those fronts for you?
Okay, let's see. Which is going to be the easiest to talk about first? From a content standpoint,
the content, talking about bullying as a theme and the message it's conveying.
From a content standpoint, they did a good job of following several different kids. It wasn't just one kid.
Right.
But they followed several kids around and showed the repercussions of bullying and how it affects them, how it affects their family, how it affects their siblings possibly, how it affects their friends that may see them getting bullied. It did a good job of focusing on that. And I think it would be a very important film for people to see, adults definitely. Anyone who has children, definitely seek it out. And then probably for middle school and high school, I think it would be a good film for them. Younger than that, probably not, because there is some stuff that does. It would be a shame for this film to have been rated R. They've kind of backed off now to PG-13, but R keeps the people that need to see it from seeing it. But PG-13, I think, is good enough that parents aren't going to be like, oh, it's a PG movie, I'll just stick it in for my kids. You wouldn't want to do that.
It's a pretty rough movie, right?
It has some rough stuff, but it needs to be.
Yeah.
And it's not like in-your-face, gratuitous violence. For example, there's stuff that happens in Spiderman that that is just as violent. Some stuff's happening there. So if that's PG-13, this should be. The fact that this is real, I think, made them.
From a content standpoint, before you get into more of the technical side of it being a documentary, is this something that you feel like is more important for kids who may be bullies to see, or is it more important for the parents of possible bullies to see? Or is it for those who are being bullied? Who is the target audience for this and the message that it's trying to convey?
Wow, that's going to spill over into the documentary side. So let me try to answer that as effectively as possible. It's definitely for kids who are being bullied. Okay. That's the good target. And in a way, it could be for the bullies to make them realize you are having this effect. Do you realize what you're doing?
Kind of hopefully an eye-opener to some of those kids.
Now, let me transition over into the how is this as a documentary.
Okay.
It frustrated me in the movie. They followed what was happening to the recipients of the bullying. They followed that very well, but they never but they never investigated why they were really being bullied. Like they at one point they did identify at least 2 bullies, and they clearly showed that they were bullies. I wish they would have interviewed them. They had them. They were taken to a guidance counselor's office. They basically admitted that they had done some bullying. They were reprimanded by an assistant principal. And at that point, it just would have made it more of a documentary to me if they would have said, okay, why are you you've admitted you're doing this. Right. Why are you doing this?
So they never really explored that deeply, the reasons for bullying.
No.
It was more of the effects.
Right. It's just, this is happening. This is bad. In the movie, there are some deaths. There's a hanging. There's other things. Yeah. And so that happens because of bullying. Okay. And so they definitely, the ramifications and the fact that this is serious, but it painted the bullies as just, they are nothing but evil. And I wish that there had been a little bit more even-handedness to figure out, not necessarily that what they did is excusable, but why they did it. Because to me, just trying to make a law or legislate it isn't going to solve the problem. You need to figure out why the people are bullying and try to help that, in addition to trying to get them to prevent them from bullying people, but to make the problem go away. Does that make any sense?
No, sure. So what I'm getting from you is that this was more of an exploration of the effects of bullying and to hear the stories of those who have gone through bullying situations and the way it's affected the people around them. But it's not a deep investigative documentary on why bullies do what they do, the effects, the influences they have on attacking others and being so vicious with others.
Right. And it irritated me too, because it is good for people who have been bullied to see that there is hope. I mean, yes, There's a lot of despair in here too, because some people kill themselves, but there's hope because there's families that kind of unite and they kind of say, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to not be quiet about this. We're going to make this the national issue. And actually, I'm pleased that, and I have 2 young kids, and at their elementary school, every year they have a anti-bullying week.
Sure, yes.
So they talk about it. It's out there. They know about it.
Right.
So that's, that gives me hope. But I just wish that there had been, I felt like the documentary makers kind of got off of asking some of the tough questions. Like they could have confronted. Now, granted, the bullies were young kids. So, okay. But there are some parental figures in this movie that for whatever reason, there's a young boy who's being bullied. His mother is interviewed at length.
Okay.
The father, who I think is more like the son, is not interviewed. He is never interviewed. He's never asked about anything. And some of his ways that he talks to his son, I think the documentary filmmaker could at some point not jump in and put himself in the film. That wouldn't have been good.
Right.
But could have had some conversations with him that might have shed some more light on things. And to me, they kind of took the easy way out. They also painted school administration in many cases and law enforcement in many cases in a very poor light.
Okay.
Like they're just not taking, they don't care.
I was going to ask who comes out looking bad out of this movie. And so that's where it sounds like the answer is.
I feel like there again, they did that by, they would be in these scenarios where they would, have a camera there and conversation would be going on, but they never took those officials to the side and said, okay, now why don't you tell me, why do you think bullying is not that big of an issue? Or how do they never let them kind of comment. All they did was these structured conversations. So that kind of bothered me.
So it sounds like the content area you're saying is important. It was a good messages to be hearing, but as a documentary, it didn't really go into all the aspects that it probably could have or should have to really explore this issue at its fullest potential.
Right. I mean, it brought to the forefront a topic that is important, but as far as exploring it and understanding why things were happening, not so much.
And see, and that's more of my, I know the effects of bullying. I don't mind watching a documentary that explores more of the effects of bullying, but my biggest question mark when it comes to bullying is what are the influences causing bullies to be bullies?
Right.
And it doesn't sound like that really gets answered very well.
Right. And I guess, maybe they just didn't think that would be as interesting subject matter because if you were to ask people, why do you think a bully is a bully? Well, he probably gets beat up at home or his parents are drug addicts.
See, that's where I want to backtrack a little bit and find out. Is it the kids are acting out because of their home situation? Is it because of what they're being taught by their parents? Is it because of something with society? Who knows? I'm curious about that. So it's good for me knowing when I go to see this film that that's not really going to be investigated very deeply. No. This is really talking about those who have gone through bullying situations and the effects of them and their families and people around them.
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, do you recommend people check this out, as a documentary? Do you think people ought to seek this out for its subject matter? How do you recommend this?
I would recommend people seek it out rather from a documentary perspective or just for a content perspective because they want to learn about it. It is an issue and, it teaches, it tries to make people realize how the things that you say and the things that you do, they affect people. Sure. And so you should really be careful of what you're doing. I will say one of the aspects too that I thought they were going to go down a bully path with, and the wrong word is not excited that they were going to go down the bully path, but there's a young lady who pulls a gun on a bus.
Okay.
And And she was being bullied, and as a result, she pulls a gun on a bus and then starts kind of waving it around and making threats. Now, it would have been interesting for them to take that and then say, okay, now you are the bully. You have this gun. Why were you doing that? And so to try to see, like, how did that feel to be a bully? Do you realize, and they didn't take that option. But I thought I thought they were, and then they were going to paint her in the light of, like, she's a bully, she's misunderstood. So that was interesting. And I think actually someone was saying last night that they had heard that was one of the reasons the film got rated R, because it shows a girl pulling a gun, and it's real footage that was captured on a bus video camera or whatever.
Wow.
And it shows her, like, brandishing a gun.
Ouch.
And,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks for the review, Chris. And maybe if I get a chance to check it out in the coming weeks, I will chime in with that as well. So appreciate the feedback on the review there. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will be taking Chris down the Yellow Brick Road for some movie news, as well as taking a little boat ride. I'm going to leave you guessing on both of those. And we're also going to be coming back with our recommendations. And I'll go ahead and give you a fair notice, Chris. My recommendation for this month is one pulled straight from my Hall of Shame, films I had never seen until just recently.
Oh.
So stay tuned for that when we come back from Footcandle Films.
Main Cellar City Club, Hickory's premier music and event venue, welcomes to the stage rock band Winger, Friday, July 20th. On Saturday, July 21st, Main Cellar hosts an intimate dinner show with Grammy-winning guitarist and Indie award-winning duo Al Pettaway and Amy White. For more information on these shows and others, contact Main Cellar at 828-345-6246 or visit their Facebook page.
Hello and welcome back to Footcandle Films. I'm Alan. This is Chris.
Hello.
And what we've done, we've just had our two main reviews where we talked about The Amazing Spider-Man and the documentary Bully. Mm-hmm. So with that, we'd like to transition into a little bit of movie news. I got a couple items I want to throw out. I have fun with this where I pull some headlines from some either movies in production or directors that we're big fans of. And let's talk about what our thoughts are on this news regarding a possible upcoming movie or a career move by one of our actors or directors we like. And then we'll finish up the show by both of us giving a recommendation for a film that is currently available online, can be viewed on Netflix or some other streaming service that we think you ought to check out. So let's go on to the movie news first. I mentioned the Yellow Brick Road before the break here. Did you know that there is a prequel to The Wizard of Oz currently in production and about to be wrapped and released next year?
No.
Did not know that.
Is it a musical?
It is not a musical that I'm aware of, but it is a connection with the very first movie that we reviewed.
Okay.
The film is Oz, the Great and Powerful. Two connections to the Spider-Man series.
Okay.
One, the director is Sam Raimi. Two, it stars James Franco. James Franco stars as the man who becomes the Wizard of Oz, the actual Oz. This is a story about how he becomes the Wizard of Oz. So you really hadn't heard about this?
No.
Wow. Okay, well, let me tell you some of the other details on this.
I don't know. I mean, it just sounds goofy enough that if somebody told me the premise, and I remember people telling me, oh, go see Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm like, really? A movie based on a ride at Disney World? That's really a movie. Okay. And I went and saw it. Awesome. However, there's also Battleship that was based on a game that was not good. So this sounds really goofy, but I don't know.
Well, it is Sam Raimi, who I'm hit or miss on. I don't think he did a great job with Spider-Man 1 and 3. I thought number 2 was really good, but I didn't like number 1. I was really let down with the first one.
Really?
Third one I thought was just crap. But I do like some of his other things. I actually think Simple Plan was a film he did that I really enjoyed. The Evil Dead movies I haven't seen in years, but those were kind of fun and done very creatively. I don't know how I feel about this one either. It's interesting. If this was a no-name director with a no-name cast, it would be another one of those direct-to-DVD movies that I wouldn't really care about. But you've got Sam Raimi directing. You've got James Franco starring. Michelle Williams is in it as Glinda, the Good Witch.
Yeah, sure.
You've got Rachel Weisz in here playing a character I'm not familiar with. And you've also got Mila Kunis in here as another character that I'm not familiar with. So some really good acting chops in there. And no matter whatever you say about James Franco, the guy can act if he needs to.
Sure.
I think the question is, does he actually want to in some films? I think in the Spider-Man films, he was pretty bad. But I do think in
127
hours was really good.
Oh, yeah.
And a couple other things he did, I thought he did as well. He did a pretty good job on. So, Oz the Great and Powerful, interesting, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I probably would not rush out and see it, but it's interesting.
March 2013, we're looking at, so a little less than a year away. So, anyway, thought that was kind of an interesting tie-in with the original Spider-Man films.
And I wonder if their plan. Like, you have to wonder, why is he doing that? Are they trying to reboot Oz movies? Would they remake Wizard of Oz? Which would be interesting.
That would be very interesting.
Actually, I could see, but Sam Raimi's not him. But if it's like Sam Raimi's vision, where Tim Burton redoing Wizard of Oz or something like that, where it's not a musical and it's just like the story, I could see maybe for some reason they decide to do it.
Well, and I think the question becomes, too, kind of like it was with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Is why?
Why, but when I heard the reason why for remaking those films, it made sense. The original book was very different than the movie that we originally got. Mm-hmm. Same as with The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
I've never read the book that The Wizard of Oz.
And there's several books. There's Return to Oz.
There's a whole series.
Yeah, yes.
I've never read those books. My understanding is that the book was fairly different than the movie we got, with the Judy Garland movie.
Sure.
So if somebody came in and said, I want to do it very faithful to the book, that's interesting to me. As long as it's different enough that it's not just a shot-for-shot remake with new stars.
Right.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I know that was the intent. Tim Burton wanted to make a film that was more like the original novel than what we got with the Gene Wilder movie. A, it wasn't really that much different.
No.
And B, it wasn't anywhere as good. So that didn't work. But I'm all for directors wanting to go back and explore source material and try a new slant on it. But if it comes out to be 95% the same, just with new actors, I don't see the point.
Right.
So that's where I am with that. Now, moving from that one classic story to an even more classic story, the film Noah, coming out in 2014, is the next film by Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah, we mentioned this a while.
It's kind of taking a little bit more shape here, which I think is interesting. I'm very curious about this.
You haven't heard anything since the original.
Yeah, there seems to be right now kind of a real motion to do more biblical related stories in movies. Because you've got this one, the Noah story with the Ark by Darren Aronofsky. About the same time now that this has been in production, there's now news coming out that Will Smith is planning on doing a film about Cain and Abel.
Whoa, I had not heard that.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting these stories starting to come back around a little bit. I don't know if we're getting back to a period like we did with the Ten Commandments and some of those movies. A little more of the biblical stories starting to get told a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know if this is part of something, of a movement or not, but I'm very curious about this Darren Aronofsky movie. I was a huge fan of Black Swan. I like pretty much all of other Aronofsky's films. The Wrestler was one of my favorites that year. So this is Russell Crowe starring as Noah. You've got Emma Watson from the Harry Potter series in it. You've got Jennifer Connelly, who was with Darren Aronofsky in, what was the film that she was in with him?
Was it Requiem for a Dream?
Yes, Requiem for a Dream, the really disturbing one.
Right.
So sounds still really interesting, but I'm just curious. I'm curious if we're going to start to see some of these more classic biblical related stories start to make a renaissance here in the movies.
If anyone could make a movie about the Noah story that would be interesting to me, it would be Darren Aronofsky.
Well, interesting is going to be the key word for it. I'm just curious when I hear a project like this, is he going down a Last Temptation of Christ like Scorsese did back in the 80s, where he is going to take a very radical view of the interpretation of the story?
Happened.
Or is he going for a more general audience type of appeal? I don't know. I really don't.
I would assume he's going to do something very strange, but good, because you think of something like The Fountain, which was crazy.
Yes,
and you think of him applying that that kind of sensibility to something like the flooding and all that stuff.
But you know what I loved about Aronofsky is the fact that he went from The Fountain, which, like he said, was crazy, way out there, very visual, very stylish, very imaginative, to The Wrestler, which was, to me, a wonderful movie, but it was about as close to documentary style, very straightforward narrative, nothing really crazy going on other than some very tenseful moments. But, it was very two polar opposite films, and they both worked to some degree. Now, I thought The Fountain had its problems, but it wasn't a lack of ambition. I mean, it was just some things were very confusing and hard to follow, and it made the enjoyment of the film a little less than maybe it could have been.
Right.
So Aronofsky, I know we've mentioned him before in our news, but he's a fascinating director for me. He pulled out of doing the Wolverine movie, which was my tie-in back to the superhero movie, because he was going to be the next big radical superhero director, kind of following like what they've been doing with the Dark Knight series. I was really curious to see Darren Aronofsky try to tackle the superhero genre. He pulled out of that production for whatever reason, and this is the film he settled on working on. So very curious.
Yeah.
2 films I'm very interested in, some classic tales being told. The key is going to be what angle are they taking with these?
I'll buy a ticket for the Noah movie now.
Oh, yeah. Noah's definitely a lot more interesting to me than the Oz film, but I'm curious about both. Yeah. I think it's going to be really key to see how family friendly are they, how unique are they, how visionary are they. A lot of good, similar questions between both films.
Right.
So.
I'm imagining the Oz. What's it called?
Oz the Great and Powerful.
I'm imagining that being as much of a mess as Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. That's kind of what I'm like.
That was not good.
And I envision James Franco being like the Mad Hatter, like it's like
having
Johnny
a very
Depp
showy role.
and like kind of being this wacky wizard thing. And I'm just like, it's to me, not knowing anything about it, it sounds like a mess like that was. But maybe.
Well, I will say Oz the Great and Powerful. Supposedly there's a trailer out now as of this week. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay,
that'll tell us a lot about the tone of the film.
True.
Noah is still a ways off. I think that's a 2014 movie, so we've got a ways to wait for Noah. But interesting things.
Yeah.
Okay, now's the part of the show where we like to talk about some recommendations. We kind of close out the show, leaving you with an idea of a film that you could actually go out today, shut off your iPod listening to this podcast, and go watch these films right now if you really wanted to. We like to give some recommendations, tell you why we recommend them. And the key is these are ones either available through Amazon online or Netflix or some other source of getting movies pretty quick. Chris, you and I, we both have kids. We both have full-time jobs. We stay pretty busy. Getting out to the movie theater on a regular basis is tough for us at times. We do our best to do it, to review these new films, but it's still tricky and costly. This is now a way of saying, hey, there's a lot of good films out there online that you can check out as well. So with that, Chris, let me turn it over to you. I want to hear your recommendation for this month.
I'll give you a reason to maybe go see the new movie that's coming out called The Watch. It's a comedy that has Ben Stiller and
Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn. And it has also in the cast, if you've seen the previews, it has a guy with kind of an afro and some nerdy looking glasses.
I know where you're going with this.
His name is Richard Ayoade. I'm going to stick with that. Ayoade.
I believe you're right.
Anyways, it has him in it. And you're kind of thinking, why are you mentioning him? Well, he wrote and directed a 2010 movie called Submarine. And it's a comedy, coming of age, comedy drama. And it was set in over in England, Swansea, which I think is, I don't know, somewhere over in England. But anyways, it has a very Wes Anderson feel to it.
I had heard that about it.
And but don't let that discourage you.
It's not copying Wes Anderson as much, is it? I mean,
no, I don't feel like it, because I feel like I guess you could think, looking at the trailer, you could think it looks a lot like Rushmore.
Okay. I have seen the trailer, and I did think it seems like a Rushmore knockoff.
And I mean, I could see how you could think that, but don't let that discourage you, because the guy who plays is a boy called Oliver Tate, and he is amazing. And it's a different story. It's basically kind of like a love story, teen love story. And he makes the movie worthwhile and makes his performances so different from anything that was in Rushmore. And also, Sally Hawkins plays his mom.
Oh, wow. I didn't know she was in that.
Yeah. And she does not look very good. And his father, I can't remember the guy's name who plays the father, but if you see him, I think it's Noah Taylor, I think, plays his father. But it's just, he's a really strange looking actor, and he plays the dad. And it's interesting because the whole movie centers around his relationship, or he wants to date this girl. At the same time, his parents have a very strained relationship. So he's trying to kind of keep his parents together, yet develop this relationship with this girl that he's in high school with. And so it's a very interesting kind of parallel examination of how relationships work. So it's the cinematography in it is awesome. The music, which reminds you a lot of how Wes Anderson pairs music with moments in cinema, is it'll remind you of Wes Anderson. But it's really good, And I urge you to check it out, and it's streaming on Netflix.
Well, a couple interesting notes on the director and writer, Richard Ayoade.
Yes.
I did notice him in the trailer for The Watch. He is the one character that most American audiences are going to see in the trailer and be like, who's that guy?
Who are you?
Right. I have been watching the IT Crowd, the It Crowd, on Netflix streaming, which is a British sitcom that he has been in or was in for several years.
Okay.
So my wife and I are now in season 2. We've been watching it. He plays a character named Moss, which hysterical character is a very similar to a Big Bang Theory over in England.
Okay.
He plays a very eccentric character, a lot of curious ticks to him and all. So I started researching him and saw, oh, wow, he'd made a movie and wrote and directed a movie, Submarine, which I've actually got on my Netflix queue lined up to see.
It's good.
And then I read even more that he's actually directed music videos for one of my all-time favorite bands, the Arctic Monkeys. He's supposedly really good friends with the band. He's directed some of their music videos.
Interesting.
So I'm very curious about this guy now. And now he's kind of coming over to America, starring in a big-budget comedy film, coming out in a few weeks. Interesting trajectory for this guy. I already had this film on my queue. I'm definitely going to bump it up a little bit more after your recommendation.
Well, what was interesting to me, too, is I noticed Ben Stiller produced the movie, Submarine. And
Submarine? Oh, really?
Yeah. And so now he's in this movie with Ben Stiller. So I'm wondering, did Ben Stiller see maybe the IT Crowd? He's like, this guy, this guy's good.
He's really funny in the IT Crowd.
I wonder if he had any writing on The Watch with Ben Stiller. I wonder if he did any writing on that.
But definitely somebody to watch. I mean, to know that he's an actor, director, and writer, and has pulled off some pretty impressive things so far. I think he's somebody we'll definitely be seeing a lot more of here in the States in the coming years. Cool. Okay, with mine, I mentioned before the break that I've got my my wall of shame. There are several films that Netflix keeps reminding me that I really need to see. It highly recommend that I've never seen before.
Okay.
Ones that every time I get into a conversation about films with people, it's normally the ones when they bring up a film, I have to kind of mutter and say something incoherent to disguise the fact that I don't know what I'm talking about because I've never seen that film before.
I'm curious as to what film this is.
So this is a film that's been on my queue for a while, and while I was traveling, I finally got a chance to see it. It's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh.
Never seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
1975 film, Milos Forman. I'm sure many of you listening to this podcast have probably seen this film. But here's what my recommendation is. If you haven't seen it in a really long time, you need to see it again. If you've never seen it, you need to go see this film. And it is on Netflix, at Netflix Instant. You can stream it, ready to go. I've always been so torn on Jack Nicholson. I like him as an actor, but I do think in the last 20 to 30 years, his stuff is kind of one note.
He's fallen into a rut.
Yeah. It's kind of like what Al Pacino's been to some degree as well. A little bit of a caricature of himself.
All right.
I was one of the people that, although I enjoyed his role as the Joker in the Tim Burton Batman movie, I also kind of thought it was just Jack being Jack Nicholson turned up to 11.
Yeah.
So, I've seen him in other movies. He was more recently in The Departed. And there again, it was just Jack Nicholson being Jack Nicholson. I didn't really get it.
Right.
It kind of took me going back to this film and watching this to realize, okay, no, this guy had some really strong acting chops.
Right.
Because I was really impressed with his performance in this film. Yes, it was still Jack Nicholson being Jack Nicholson, but it was a young, raw, unshaped Jack Nicholson at that point where I think he was just starting to develop that crazy Nicholson personality.
Sure. And
he really let it fly in this film. And it's a great movie. It's one that I really hate that it took me so long to get around to seeing.
What'd you think? I don't remember the actress's name, but the one who played Nurse Ratched. What'd you think of
Louise Fletcher?
Okay, what'd you think?
The thing is, I've always heard Nurse Ratched as the example of like the perfect bad villain in a movie. And going in with that mentality, yes, she was not very pleasant, but yet I also kind of sympathized with her at times a little bit. Almost going in with thinking that she was going to be this pitch perfect villain actually made her a little more human for me to see.
Wow.
I thought she was good. Maybe I expected a little more from her role just because of how much I've been hearing about it in pop culture for like the last 20 years. But I thought that was good. I didn't know Danny DeVito was in the film, one of his first film appearances as one of the residents of the psychiatric hospital. But man, this was a good movie. Very good. Very unexpected at the end. I did not expect it to go the directions it did with the main character and how it all ended, wrapped up.
Right.
But really good, really interesting. I think it brought up a lot of good questions. I think you find yourself asking the same question throughout the film. Is Jack Nicholson's character really crazy, or was it kind of an act? I mean, you still find yourself wrestling with that a little bit towards the end, which that to me is a sign of a good movie. It had me thinking afterwards. I think knowing that it was back in 1975, one of the first depictions on film of a true mental institution, that was really pretty authentic, and I think had a lot of realism mixed in there. It was a good movie. Very surprising for me how well done it was, and one that I seriously regret having not seen for my entire life. Cool. You've seen it though, right?
Yes, I have, and I liked it. I would be curious to go back and revisit it to see Jack Nicholson. Yeah,
just a young, untidied Jack Nicholson,
right.
Kind of left to turn loose. I got the impression that Milos Forman, the director, probably did say in some of those scenes, Jack, just turn it loose, just go, just do something, and it showed those times. I think directors that do that now, we get the same old dog and pony show, Jack Nicholson. This was him really when he was trying to find out what kind of character he wanted to be in the theater. And I just thought it was a great movie. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. It's worth seeing. It is a long one. It's 133 minutes. So plan on maybe a 2-sitting movie for this one, but definitely worth checking out on Netflix Instant, available now. Okay, Chris, I think we're done. Another successful episode.
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man. We both said a good movie. I was more enthusiastic about it. We both had our misgivings with it being fairly similar to the original Spider-Man movie. This film, Bully, Chris got to see, does recommend it, tackles some very important subject matter, an important film to see, but maybe didn't explore all the aspects of the situation that a good documentary could have done.
Sure.
We talked about some news, Oz, the Great and Powerful, and Noah both coming to theaters in the next few years, taking some very old classic tales and putting a new spin on them. And then our recommendations. One Submarine from Chris, and then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a more classic pick from me. All right, we're going to wrap it up. We will be together next month. I think we're planning on dropping in, though, from time to time with some little small film reviews of some new movies. Can't guarantee what frequency we'll do that with, but we are hoping to have a couple of those maybe in between our monthly shows.
It's the summer, so there are lots of movies.
There's lots of movies. Yeah. Actually, we're going to go ahead and record my little quick review of the film Ted that I did see recently. I think right after this one, and we'll put it up pretty soon after this film comes out.
Is that Footcandle Spotlight? Is that what we're going with?
I like the sound of that. Footcandle Spotlight. That's going to be our Footcandle Spotlight films. So if you have subscribed to our show, which we hope you have, you will get those little Spotlight episodes in between whenever we put one out. If you have not subscribed, please do so. You can go to iTunes and click the subscribe button or any other podcast reader that you use to listen to the shows. If you have any questions for us, feedback, things you'd like to say about movies we've talked about or your own opinions, please let us know. We would love to see them. Our email address is info@themesh.tv. That's themesh, THEMESH.TV. And send us a note. Let us know it's for Footcandle Films. Tell us whatever you'd like to tell us. And maybe it's something we can read in a future episode in our mailbag. You can also visit our website at themesh.tv just to see a little bit more about the other shows on the network and go back and even listen to old episodes of Footcandle Films. Even those, the films we talk about are new films. So obviously by the time you go back and listen to old episodes, they're not new anymore.
Right.
A lot of them are available on DVD or online. So the reviews kind of still apply. And plus, I think it'd be interesting. We ought to do this one day. Go back and listen to some of our old shows where we're talking about news for films that are coming out soon. And now they have come out and we've had our reactions to them, and see if our initial impression of what that film was going to be like
is anything
matched
close?
How it actually came out. That could be kind of a fun going back blast from the past at time we need to do. Sure. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We will be back next month with a full episode, but stay tuned for some of the Spotlight episodes as we release those whenever we have a new film to review. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Watch films in the company of like-minded people in the dark. Watch films in the underground. We won't let anyone know where you are. The films that don't make it to Carmike at the mall, or ones that were famous when Grandpa would watch them. Film Society.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.
Conclusion of the movie, we see credits.
And we're talking about Amazing Spider-Man again.
Amazing Spider-Man,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
So, yeah, the credits.
Conclusion, credits are rolling. And then you see a prison scene.
Yep.
And you see the lizard, and he is...
You see the lizard in human form.
In human form, yeah. You see the doctor,
Sure.
Dr. Connors.
Yep.
And he's hanging out, and you hear voices, or he's like voices, and then he says, there's appears to be another figure in the...
Another figure appears in the room,
And he
out
says,
of the
did
shadows.
you tell him the truth about...
Did you tell the boy the truth about his parents?
Right. And he says, leave him alone.
Yeah, the lizard guy says, I didn't, and you need to leave him alone.
Yeah, Connor said, I didn't, and you need to leave him alone.
And that's it.
Okay.
The guy walks away, disappears back in the shadows, scene's done.
Okay, so are we to assume that is Osborn or whatever?
Well, okay, here's a little.
Or are we to assume that's just a dialogue? Because he hears voices when he's down in the sewer. Like
Yeah,
he
the
has
lizard, Dr. Connors hears voices in his head, but it's his own voices talking as more of a lizard-style voice. So I don't think that's the deal. I think this was a real character that we see in that, and we don't know if it's a prison or a mental hospital or what, but it's something where he's locked up.
Yeah.
Okay, supposedly there was an interview with the actor who played Kirk Connors
Whatever his name
at some
is.
convention recently. I saw this written up online.
Okay.
Somebody was asking him about that final scene, and he voluntarily offered the fact that it was not Norman Osborn in that scene, but it is a character associated with Norman Osborn that fans of the comic book would recognize. So we don't know what the deal is there. Now, you want to hear my philosophy on my?
I do, but let me say something before I forget, which is also a criticism of Spider-Man, not a spoiler, or maybe it is. I don't know, but they're at Oscorp, right? And that's formed by Osborn, dude. He's not in the movie.
Norman Osborn is never in the movie.
He's not in the movie, but they keep mentioning him something about he's dying.
He's dying, yes.
And that kind of irritated me that they kept mentioning that. And you know him from the other movies where he was the Goblin. And so, But
that's the same issue you're talking about, though. If the other movies had never existed, that would not be an issue at all. Norman Osborn would be almost this like mystery character that we know nothing about. We just know that he created this company and he's dying now. The fact that we've seen a Norman Osborn in a previous movie is what kind of stinks about this whole thing. It clouds our perception of it.
True.
Here's what I believe is happening at the end of the film.
Mysterio.
And I could be completely wrong with this. No Mysterio, although that would be awesome. I think Peter Parker's father is still alive. And I think that's him. I think Peter Parker's father is Norman Osborn. That's my philosophy. That's what I'm going to say right there. I think Norman Osborn. I'm
So
guessing.
that is Norman Osborn.
Well, I'm guessing that they are playing up Norman Osborn as almost a mythical figure that very few people have either seen or really know, but it truly is. I bet you Peter Parker's father.
But we know that he was married. Are you saying the father that disappeared?
Yes.
Is not really his father?
I think they may be pulling an Obi-Wan Kenobi telling Luke that his father died when his father didn't really die. You see what I'm saying?
He became another person.
Yeah. That's what I'm guessing. I'm guessing the father took off, Peter's father, when he was a kid. That was like 15 years ago or so.
With the mother. Father and mother took
10 years
off
ago.
together.
Yep. But
And then there was a plane crash.
I am guessing that he faked his death, took on a new personality to continue his work, and has like somehow either he is dying now or he's like living in seclusion or something. That is my belief.
Huh.
I could be way off on this. There's a lot of ways to poke holes in that theory, but that's my theory right now.